Hi, everybody. Today I want to talk to you about the principles of design in relation to sculpture. So, we've talked a lot about the elements of art and the principles of design and how they connect to one another and how they complement one another. I keep using the analogy of baking a cake. So, if you're baking a cake, the ingredients are your elements of art, like the flour, sugar, butter, that kind of thing. And the directions in your recipe are the principles of design, how you put all those things together. When you cream butter and sugar together, or whip um, heavy cream and things like that, or fold in something. It's kind of like the principles of design, where you're using the elements of art and arranging them in a way to show each principle. So at the time that we're kind of going through this, you've already done a few of the principles of design and have hopefully looked over all of them in some way. But I want to talk about how the principles of design relate to sculpture, three-dimensional forms. It's easy to see where the principles of design might work in a two-dimensional piece, but when you have a three-dimensional piece, it's a little different. So this first piece I want to show you by Antony Gormley. It is, if you look very closely at it, you can see that it is, get my mouse, a series of metal sticks that create a positive and negative space. You can kind of see through the sculpture. You can see the dark lines in contrast with the white background. So if you were to say, which principle of design does this fall into, it could really fall into quite a few of them. But if we were to focus on one that we could focus on would be contrast. You can see the contrast of the black sticks with the white background and the space in between. Here we have another one. This is called Endless Column by Constantine Brancusi. And you can see it is a tower. It's all by itself. This would be emphasis. Now, we could say there are a couple different ones that this falls under, like pattern, rhythm, things like that. But the one that stands out in my mind is emphasis, because it is all by itself and it is really drawing our attention to one specific location. Here we have a piece by Alberto Giacometti, and you can see the long, skinny legs. This is very common in a lot of his work. Proportion. Proportion is an important principle of design to really think about how things relate to one another. When you look at this human figure over here, its proportions are off. And so it's one of the first things we notice. It's too skinny and too tall, and all of its limbs don't seem to be in relationship to the size of the figure itself. Here we have Reclining Figure by Henri Moore, and you can see it has these smooth lines. This is actually kind of a gigantic piece. But you could say that this falls under harmony. Now, could you also say that it falls under movement? Sure. Our eyes move throughout it. You could say it falls under unity as well and rhythm. But harmony is one that came to my mind first when I look at this. So as we keep going through this, I want you to think about the fact, what do you see when you look at it as compared to what I see? Because really, we can see two very different things. I want you to take a moment and look at this sculpture called Tower. And I want you to think about what principle of design, of the principles of design that you have in front of you, which one do you think this shows the most clearly? I chose pattern. That doesn't mean it's the best answer or the right answer, but in my mind, the pattern of the lines is really obvious here. Now, somebody could have also thought about the randomness of it and the variety that's presented, because there are no two shapes that are repeated. So really, pattern and variety are pretty dissimilar by default, but we can both see each of those in this piece and both be correct. Aman is this piece right here, another really huge sculpture. And the one I noticed in this one was balance. Remember, balance can be formal balance, informal balance, but it can also be radial balance, or some people call it centrifugal balance, where it comes out from the center. This piece right here is really interesting. It's, again, a very large piece, but I want you to think about, as we're deciding which principle of design this one falls under, how do your eyes look at this picture? How do they stay in one place? Do they move around? Are there lines that are kind of guiding your eye throughout it? That's the first thing I noticed when I saw the picture of this sculpture. And so for me, I very much see movement present in this piece. It just feels like it's constantly moving, even if it's not. This sculptor, this is Echo by Katie McGuire. She does a lot of these really large, I think, very interesting sculptures that are inside these glass cases. And when I look at this, I see unity. Now, if you think back to the Henri Moore piece that we saw that I put down as harmony, they have a lot of similarities. They have a lot of repeated shapes and lines and movement within them. You can have harmony inside of unity, and you can also have unity inside of harmony, but you can also have them very separate from one another. Something can be harmonious, but also not be incredibly unified in its nature. This can get really confusing because we want to put both of those together and think of them in the same way, but they really are not the same. And I would encourage you to look back on your definitions to kind of understand what the distinct differences are between the two. Here we have a, looks like a stegosaurus almost, called Berlin Summer. And it's made out of kind of found objects. And I chose variety. Now, could it also be pattern and unity? Yes, you can have unity and variety at the same time. You can have unity in the shape, but variety in the patterns that are within those shapes. Kind of like how we have a lot of variety in the colors and the pieces that were used here. So your assignment is going to be from here, what you need to think about is you're going to create a sculpture using found objects from home or on the shelves here at school. I've got lots of shelves full of found objects. You are welcome to use anything in my room. So that means if you need to come in when you don't have class with me or during a study hall, you can completely do that at any point. Your sculpture cannot be taller than 8 inches. So that's pretty small. You're making a very small sculpture here, a small representation of what you're choosing to do. It must stand on its own or hang on a wall. And I'm going to add too that it could hang from a ceiling if you wanted it to. But it must have something, so if it's something that won't stand up on its own, then you need to make a stand for it so that it will stand up on its own. Your sculpture must emphasize at least one principle of design. Now, naturally, your piece is going to show more than just one principle of design. But before you begin, I want you to have one specific principle of design in mind that you are going to focus on throughout the creation of this project so that you really are thinking about it as you're creating and building. And when you're done, you are going to have to write about it. So when does this due? We're going to have at least a week to work on this. And we're going to have to really evaluate how we're doing. So throughout the process, you're going to be sending me images of your progress and giving me updates on how it goes. And I will be sharing a due date with you later, at a later time. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Let me know. If you need any clarification, of course, let me know that as well. I can't wait to see what you come up with.